How is it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Coffee Break. I'm your host of the show, Hunter Thomas. Always love hopping on here and just, talking business, shooting the breeze with you all. I really appreciate all the support that you've been showing the podcast, the show. It's a great time. I really enjoy doing it. If you're new here, basically what happens is the first part, I just kind of brain dump, run through what's going on either in the disc golf world or whatever that might look like. What's going on behind the scenes at Foundation. And then the second part, I get into a little Q&A section. So really, I really enjoy doing this. So I'll keep doing it every Tuesday for as long as I can. But first off, releasing on the site this week, still a little slow. I think things are about to start picking up a little bit more. But we have some new Prodigy stuff dropping. I don't know all of it, but I know there's like some new the Spectrum plastic. It's like their baseline jawbreaker looking plastic. Some new ones of those. I think they also have like the Kitty Zilla stamp, I believe is what they're calling it, but it's exactly what it sounds like. Kitty Godzilla. Really cool looking stamp overall. I think it's a pretty detailed stamp. So some fun Prodigy stuff dropping, and then dropping technically next week, but before you'll hear me do Coffee Break again, will be the first wave of Ledgestone. I think it's technically like their preseason wave, but there's some really cool discs in there. Some like triple foil buzzes, all that stuff. That drops Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So that's this upcoming Monday. That is when that releases. So be sure to stay tuned to the site for all of that fun stuff. Also, if you've been missing out, I believe about every other week is going to be the rhythm I get into of doing our Whatnot streams. So we just did our second one yesterday. I just wrapped up sorting all of the signatures and everything we had to do for that and getting that sent out. It's a really good time, Whatnot is. If you don't know what Whatnot is, I hadn't really heard of it until Brody introduced us to it, but it's basically like a live auction platform, more or less. You can buy it now as well. Like you can just list a product on there. But for what it's mainly used is, like, this is one of the items we sold. I can like hold it up, and then at the bottom of the screen, it pops up with like, you can bid on it, and we just get cool discs from our used section, get some discs from our personal collection, all that fun stuff. And then yesterday we tested out, we did like a flash sale on some Big Z Maltas, and so we're able to like sell those at a really good, cheaper price for everyone. And so far it's been going great. We've been really enjoying it. We have some more creative ways to use that platform in the coming weeks, because it has some like mystery, like wheel spin, mystery item type of capabilities that we haven't messed with yet. A lot of people do it for like different card breaks, like a lot of the like Brixton cards or any sports cards. They do stuff like that. And we have some ideas on how we can use it for disc golf discs. So I think the next one we'll probably be like a Shop the Warehouse type vibe, and we will probably introduce some of the more mystery stuff. So I don't want to spoil that too much because we still got to flush it all out. But I feel like every other week's a good pacing for that. So if you haven't joined in yet, be sure to check that out. And actually, if you go and use the link that I think's in like one of our more recent videos, if you use the link to join, you can actually get $15 credit to use on Whatnot. And when you use that $15 credit, we also get $5 credit. So it kind of is like a works both ways. Really fun thing from there. Sorry, I'm parched. Also, what went down since the last coffee break is we did our charity live stream on Friday. We announced the disc of the year for 2024, which to no one's surprise was the Passion. Dropped a custom stamp Passion to commemorate that. And then we also did a bunch of sales, some mystery discs, some mystery used discs, and we were able to raise pretty much right at $1,500 for the Samaritan's Purse, which is an awesome charity that we are specifically giving to their U.S. disaster relief efforts, where they're doing a lot of work with Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, and they are also gearing up to do work in California in response to the wildfires as soon as they're able to kind of get out there and get feet on the ground. So we were able to give $1,500 thanks to you all, which is just awesome. I think our original goal for the stream was 500. We always set the initial goal of like, we hope we get past this, and we got past that in like 20 or 30 minutes. Then we pushed it to our stretch goal, which is like, this is what we really want to raise, and that was 1,000, and we got to that relatively quickly, and then we pushed to 1,500, and I think the final number on the stream was like 1,385, but there was some sales that weren't factored in yet, so I think I don't know the exact final number, but it's over 1,400. I think just shy of 1,500. So awesome stuff there. So thank you all so much for that support. That was great. I do want to talk about, because I think this is kind of, it's been brought up a few different times, and, I think it's just an interesting landscape that disc golf's in. We talked about it in the off-season podcast a little bit, but in most sports, how much a player makes is basically directly correlated to how good they are on the course, on the field, on the court, on whatever. Because a lot of the times you have an organization that is paying that player, and they know the more successful their organization is, the more tickets that are going to sell, and also the better the player plays, the more jerseys they're going to sell, X, Y, and Z. So how popular the player is almost directly correlated to their performance. In individual sports, it's still somewhat that way. You see the most popular golfers are typically also the best golfers in a lot of ways, and so therefore they also end up getting some of the biggest endorsements. But in individual sports, that's not fully the case, because there is still the player who can, Bryson DeChambeau, in my opinion, is one of the most valuable golfers currently. And I think one of the big reasons is his YouTube, which sounds silly, but I mean, he's playing on Live Golf. So like, I've never watched a Live Golf tournament, but I've watched a lot of PGA Tour stuff, but I really like Bryson. So Bryson and Rory McIlroy to me are the two guys that, like, if they market, they're going to be able to reach me. But only one is because of, really he became a, face of the PGA Tour due to play. And Bryson, obviously, he's won majors. He's a phenomenal golfer, but he's not week in, week out on the PGA Tour. So individual sport, it's a little bit different, but it's still very heavily, if you are a very good player, you will get paid very, very well. Whereas in disc golf, I think that people get somewhat frustrated because you could be the 10th best player in the world and move very little plastic. So therefore you make your sponsor very little direct money. And since all the money in disc golf currently is coming from endorsements and not from purses, you can have a phenomenal season like Ganenburg and make $200,000 on the course, but the majority of people can't do that. The majority of people will make 30 to 50 touring, and I say majority, I'm saying the majority of the people in the top 20. That's kind of like the reality is if I go out and tour all year, a good season is going to be like 40, 50K, 60K. And once you factor in touring, that's not that much. So the majority of money and how you can live comfortably comes from endorsement deals. And the endorsement deals weigh very heavily the amount of plastic you move. And the amount of plastic you move is very much how you're connected to the audience. So you can have, actually, let me pull up, I'll use my phone for this. Let me pull up the current Pro Tour standings. And that way I can kind of give you, and this is obviously last year's Pro Tour standings, but we can kind of look at this and I can break it down a little bit more tangible of like what we've got going on here, right? So once we get outside the top 5, you have a players like, well, even in the top 5, you have Nicolas Antela, 3rd best player in the world, okay? Paul McBeth, 6th best. He's kind of an anomaly because he made his brand on dominance. But you have players below him, such as Anthony Barella. He had a really solid season, but he moves a ton of plastic. You scroll farther down, I would argue Gavin Babcock has more influence than Nicolas Antela. He's the 14th best. You scroll down even more, you'll find Simon Lizotte in 20th. He moves more plastic than pretty much anyone currently, 20th best player in the world. Scroll down even farther, you'll find Eagle McMahon in 28th. He still moves very good plastic. Ezra Aderhold, 35th. I would argue he moves more than Nicolas Antela. Maybe that's not true, but I would if you factor in European sales, that doesn't come into play. But as we get, farther down and we're scrolling, I'm sure I'll run into, I'm looking for Alden Harris. I don't know where he's at, but that whole vlog squad, even Brody Smith, the point I'm trying to make, and I just got an ad that I can't go away. The point I'm trying to make, and the point that I think a lot of people get frustrated with, is because you're very good at the sport doesn't mean you're going to get paid. And some people pose that as a problem. Is it actually a problem? I don't know, because in the current scheme and scope of the sport, the number one thing that manufacturers need and people need is for like plastic to move, right? So if you are a player that has a really good social media following and you're on the Pro Tour, because I do think that there's a difference between just being a social media influencer and being a Pro Tour player that has a good social media following. Because someone like Simon Lizotte, who has some Pro Tour wins, he can do stuff with a disc that no one else can really do, and he's on tour, his social media following, people are going to look to him to influence them to buy discs more than, say, us, where we have a really solid social media following built solely on disc golf, but our recommendation for a disc holds less weight than an Ezra Aderhold or a Simon in certain cases, if that makes sense, because they are Pro Tour. So like you hear they're touring week in and week out. There's just a little bit of a different connotation there. But a purely social media person like Bedanza or us or plenty of other people, they'll move more than, say, someone who's like 30th best in the world or 25th best in the world. Because if you have just Pro Tour with no social media, what do you have? And I think that is what is the reality of the current market. And it gets players somewhat frustrated. But it's because where the money is coming from is what people keep missing out on. And I had a point with this that just slipped my mind, but more or less, I think that it's just the reality of where disc golf is, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, because this is the point I was trying to make. The difference between disc golf and the NBA, or the difference between disc golf and the NFL, and somewhat the difference between disc golf and golf, is realistically with the NFL, NBA, MLB, all that, the money to be made is in the fandom of the teams, in the fandom of the sport. The money to be made in disc golf is in the players of the sport. So what do I mean by that? When you're Discraft, it's not like there's going to be so many people coming to an event and they're going to watch the player perform. The majority of disc golfers either don't know or don't regularly consume professional disc golf content. So they aren't regularly consuming Disc Golf Pro Tour round coverage, and a lot of them don't even know the Disc Golf Pro Tour exists. So those people, they are just going to be walking into a store and buying whatever disc. There's people that come in and out of our store because they got into disc golf, they search disc golf, they find there's a disc golf store here, they come in, and they have no clue the Pro Tour exists, right? That's the big difference where people get missed out on. The way other sports work is because the revenue generator and what drives the value of players is the fandom. But in disc golf, what drives the value of players is the sales. And the best way players can make sales a lot of times, because if I'm a sponsored player and I am the 10th best player in the world and I get on a lead card 1 every 5 events, well, then the only people that are really seeing me is when I have a hot round, I'll get on some live coverage. When people are at events, if they're happening to follow the second, third card, they'll see me. But other than that, by pure play, what good am I, right? Like when I'm at a tournament and I have the Innova wings on my back, if there's no promotion going on beyond that, then that alone doesn't carry much weight. It's what happens off the course, whether that's Innova doing stuff with me and promoting me as the 10th best player, or if that's me doing stuff. And I think that's where it gets lost a lot, is when Patrick Mahomes goes out, he creates influence because he's just dominant. And I'm watching Patrick Mahomes watching the NFL. That's the only way I'm consuming football. Whereas disc golf, you have your average player is never consuming the Disc Golf Pro Tour coverage. They're just going out and playing. And so that's why how good you play on the Pro Tour matters far less than in other sports, because we're a niche sport that most people wouldn't even call a sport. It's just like a hobby activity where me and my buddies just go out and have some fun at a local course. And that's where the sales are happening. So, of course, the money isn't following the performance when the performance isn't driving the money. And is that a problem in disc golf? Yes and no. It's a problem for the Disc Golf Pro Tour. Is it a problem for Discraft? I don't think so. I mean, you just have to be wise, which I think Discraft and several companies are, in who you're giving your money to, and realize how they can impact the sport and move plastic outside of the Pro Tour. And that's what's really valuable. So if you're a Pro Tour player listening, social media is where it's at. Get on there. And now what it also does is it frees up performance, because now if I'm Simon Lizotte, I can move plastic for MVP whether I win an event or whether I come in 30th. I can still post a video, reach, 60 to 100,000 people, sometimes even more with a video, and promote my new Tour Series disc. And that's going to reach more people than if I just threw it once on coverage on a lead card. And it's a lot easier to go make a video having fun. So what that does too is it takes pressure off the players, where now I don't have to rely on going out and coming in 10th, which is really freaking hard to do. I can just post videos, get monetization from that, and it's going to help my Tour Series stuff move. So I don't know. I think it's a problem for players who don't like social media. It's a problem for players who don't want to put the extra work in off the course. They just want to put the work in on the course. But I think for the players who view themselves as a business and as a brand, there's so much opportunity out there that I think, I don't know, I can see the negative sides, but I can also see the positive sides to it. So that was a little bit more rambly than I wanted. But hey, hopefully I got my point across. Hopefully it makes sense. All right, let's talk through some of these questions here. Ryder Milia said, what was your biggest struggle in the beginning of creating content for Foundation? I think the toughest part initially was, and this is for every content creator, is like when you first start creating content, when you first start doing a podcast, when you first start doing anything, there's some platforms now that this isn't true, but like especially on YouTube, for the majority of us, we kind of suck at it when you start. And so your first pieces of content aren't going to reach anyone, and it's just a slow growth, right? Because you have to get better at content to make content that's going to reach people, but also the algorithm, you're not like really in the algorithm. You're trying to build all this following and stuff like that. And so the hardest part is just staying motivated in those first few years where the audience isn't there and you're just doing it just to do it, more or less. Like you're just doing it because you enjoy it. So I think that was the biggest struggle in the content creation side, was like, Zach and I were doing a podcast every week, live streaming to 10 people and then getting 100 listens. And we were posting videos that were getting, I don't even know, like 2,000 views, if probably less than that when we first started. And it wasn't until like a year or 2 years in that things really started to go. Like I remember going to 2019 Worlds and we just hit 5,000 subscribers, and it was like sick. But we also was like, we had 5,000 subscribers. It just wasn't that big in the grand scheme of social media. And so it took time to grow it. And in those first several months, first several years of just like putting content out consistently and relying on us getting more comfortable in front of the camera, our thumbnails getting better, our titles getting better, learning our audience, building our audience. I think that was kind of the biggest struggle, is just getting over the hurdle and consistently showing up to an empty room, basically. Kiefer Disc Golf said, when you were playing tournaments, what are some of your best memories from competition? I think most of my best memories came from college disc golf. Just because like it's fun, and I did this plenty of times. So like go out and play a tournament, just you or like you and a buddy. But there's just something different about like showing up to a collegiate tournament and you have teammates you're relying on, and your teammates are relying on you. And like when you finish a round, you were like coming back to the bus or going out to get lunch or whatever, and like shooting the breeze. I think those are some of my best memories. My favorite is definitely my senior year of college, winning the Southeast Collegiate Open, which was at that time like the biggest collegiate disc golf tournament other than nationals. And we absolutely dominated that tournament. We won it by, I don't even know how much. But that was an awesome time. I think that's actually what the two trophies on the outside here behind me, if you're watching, that's what those two are, is the individual champion and team champion from Seco. And then that year, nationals, we came in third as a team, and I came in third individually. And that was a great time too. There's always like a little bit of a sadness because I graduated without ever winning a national championship, and you obviously always wanted to do that. But looking back on it, I don't know, like there's very few things competitively that you can do as fun as playing college disc golf. So I think those are some of my best memories. But yeah. Brennan Phillips said, go-to coffee order. I walk in and I judge a book by its cover when I walk into a coffee shop. And if it looks like a specialty coffee shop and it's worth me paying for a pour over or an AeroPress, I will do so. Most of the time what I'll do is I just ask the barista like a general question of like what coffee they recommend or if they have any light roast, and then just kind of hear it out, because if I go to a coffee shop and there's not even a single origin, or the only thing they do pour overs is Chemex blends, I'm gonna just save my money and get drip. But if they actually do V60 or even Chemex, but it's I'm not a big Chemex guy personally, but AeroPress, anything like that, and they're able to rattle off it's a natural process or anything, then I understand, okay, this is probably going to be worth me paying $5-6 for just a cup of black coffee. But if I walk in and it's not the vibe, then I'll just get drip, because I appreciate a dark roast for what it is, and I appreciate just the coffee flavored coffee, if you will. But it can be disappointing if I pay $6 for a pour over just to get something that tastes like gas station coffee. So I try to feel that out, and it's either just cup of drip, pour over, or AeroPress. Tristan Two Wheels said, how do you feel about Trevors' YouTube channel? I am a big Trevor Staub fan in general. Little butthurt that the number one rule was that I was not allowed to be on the channel, but I'm glad he broke it. And, hopefully he keeps breaking it at some point. But if you haven't checked it out, check it out. It's a good time. Backwoods Backpacker said, when will the Ganenburg, Glacier, and Isaac Robinson Rives be on the site? I don't know. I don't think we've gotten order forms for either of those. It's kind of the typical roadmap for manufacturers nowadays, is they will drop stuff direct to consumer first, like the Climo discs that just released or are releasing tomorrow technically. The prototypes will go direct to consumer. Then we'll be able to fill out a wholesale form for the first run or whatever. Isaac Robinson, I don't know what his collab stuff will be with Latitude, but they release that, and then there will be something that we can typically order, Team Series, Tour Series, something like that. So I think that'll be the Isaac Robinson. The Glacier, I believe, is just going to be a stock mid-range, but I think they dropped them kind of in the mystery boxes, so that I would imagine all of it in the next few months, but we don't have a shipment's coming next week type of a thing yet. Fitzy said, what are some locations you guys would consider for future battle/bucket list? BRP, Blue Ribbon Pines, love. We definitely have looked at Minnesota, mainly with the preserve being up there. I don't know the current conditions of the preserve, but that's definitely one that we are interested in, because Blue Ribbon Pines also is pretty sick. But I don't know exactly where we're going, because bucket list and bogey row battles, we like to either combine a bucket list trip with a bogey row battle or a bucket list trip with a monthly match. So I am not the planning person for that, though. That's all Trevor. Bucket list, what's tough too, is I've played several Pro Tour courses pre-foundation, so they're not on film. But we want the bucket list to be like Maple Hill, where we're all experiencing it for the first time. So there's some courses that would easily be on our bucket list, but I've already played it, and so it's just kind of a weird one. Ryan Mon asked, is Ryan Mon the best amateur of all time? Yeah, I think you did the amateur sweep this year, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, but the second you turn pro, you're no longer the best amateur of all time, which you might have already turned pro. So, now you just got to go be the best pro of all time. Just do what you did as an amateur as a pro, and we can start having some best of all time talks. Gerald Yoder said, how blessed do you feel you are to have other believers in Jesus Christ as such vital parts of foundation? I mean, very blessed. I think it makes, it makes just work easier. It makes life easier, but I mean, it's not a hiring requirement. To be honest with you, I don't know if everyone that works here is a believer. I do know our core guys are, just from conversations we've had. But it's not that's a question we ask. But I think it's just something where values align, worldview aligns, and stuff like that. It definitely is an encouraging workspace, to say the least. Obviously on camera and stuff during videos, I think that is what it is. But behind closed doors, it's definitely good to know, you got your coworkers are there for you as coworkers, but it's much deeper than that. And there's also a lot of grace extended both ways when stuff's going on outside of work. And that's not necessarily just because we're believers, but I think that, it definitely helps give you perspective on the grand scheme of what actually happens here. You know what I'm saying? Of how unimportant in the grand scheme of eternity what we're doing day to day can be, but how big of an impact it can make. So when it comes to, if someone's got to miss work for a personal thing, we know that work isn't the like end all be all, which I think is sometimes can get lost in corporate. But we also understand the positive impact, whether you're religious or not, but the positive impact that we can have just through disc golf on people. Because I know disc golf is just a lot of people's escape. And so we just try to keep disc golf light. We try to keep it fun. And we try to provide some type of content for everyone wherever they're at in disc golf so that they can enjoy the sport and have a community. Even if they're somewhere that they're the only one of their friends that likes disc golf, they can watch Foundation and have that sense of community. So yeah. Who has your favorite Tour Series disc? EAH asked. Favorite Tour Series disc? Currently, I'm going to go with the Henna Blomroos Color Glow Thunderbird. I don't know if that'll be her Tour Series this upcoming year, but the Color Glow Thunderbird I absolutely love. Technically don't have a Henna Blomroos one in my bag anymore. I have just Blue Ridge Tournament stamped one, but love it. Let's see. I'm not going to be able to get to all of these. A lot of questions. So I'm trying to pick and choose here. Oh, this is a good one. This is a really quick one. Bear Bite said cheesecake or ice cream cake. I'm an ice cream cake guy. There's just nothing like that fudge and cookie layer in the middle. Nothing like it. Some of these questions, and if you ask it, you're the only one that might know, I can't answer currently because it would spoil an announcement that we have coming soon. So, said too much. Isaiah Jacobs said, do you believe elevation changes really affects the flight of a disc? So there's two ways I'll answer this. One, I'm going to assume you mean how far above sea level are we? 762 feet. And we've went to Denver, which is thousands of feet above sea level. That definitely, it's not as drastic as people make it seem or sound. It's more just like I was throwing pretty much the same discs I would throw for the shots I was throwing. I just couldn't rely on them to flip as much, basically. So it wasn't like all of a sudden my flippiest distance driver became my most overstable. It was just it was like the disc was maybe 2 months ago, if that makes sense. So it wasn't like I have to go relearn my entire bag. So it definitely was noticeable, though. There was a definite difference. I think it just gets pitched as a much bigger difference. So if you're talking in that scheme, yes. If you're talking in uphill to downhill scheme or downhill to uphill, also yes. So if you're throwing downhill, discs will get flippier. If you're throwing uphill, discs will get more overstable. Don't ask me to explain the science behind it, but I know for sure those two are true. Plomadon said, do you think you'll do any destination races or stay relatively local? So my first marathon was a destination race. I did the Walt Disney World Marathon. That was awesome. I like to stay mainly local just because then I don't have to take my whole family, to Florida to run a race. But my next race is a half marathon at the Outer Banks, the Flying Pirate Half. And so that's somewhat of a destination, but it's also where we vacation every year. So it just kind of feels like a second home. Wish it was a second home. Maybe that's a life goal in the future. But it feels like that when we're down there because we go there. A lot of times we go there in June and we go back there in November for Thanksgiving with my wife's family. So when we're down there, it just kind of feels, it doesn't feel like a destination. It doesn't feel like we're going on vacation. It just feels like you're just, going to another place you're really familiar with. So, but beyond that, I mean, there's definitely some races I think are cool, but a lot of them are like the Boston Marathon. I'd have to cut legitimately 2 hours off my marathon time. So I got a while until I run that one. And then a lot of them are like ultra marathons that I'm just not interested in getting into that world right now. So let's see. The Adventuring Helton said, you could only bag 3 discs in a tournament. Which ones are you taking? I'd go PA3, MD3 Thunderbird. I feel like that covers everything I need to do. Michael Amadeo said, what's the next avenue of growth for the sport? I really think that it just is getting back to the roots of what was working before. People got too big for their britches during COVID. I think the grassroots growth is what's best in the current scheme. There's definitely stuff that we can do and that Foundation's going to start doing this year to try to push the sport forward a little bit more. But I don't necessarily think it's like there's an answer of like, oh, once this happens, boom, the sport's going to explode. I think that one of the biggest crimes, I talked about this last week, was just the short-term thinking when COVID money came in and not figuring out this money's not going to be here forever. What can we do to put stuff in place so that when the sport comes back down, we're in a much healthier place to like really churn out? And how can we get as many people into the sport as possible right now instead of how can we get as much money out of the people in the sport right now? I just think the thinking was wrong, but it is what it is. That's 4 years behind us. You know, we're feeling the ramifications of it currently as a sport, but we're still growing as far as I can tell, as far as I know. Like there's still growth happening. It's just the sport had to level out, and we should just get back to what we were doing before. Clinics, tournaments, get discs into PE classes, and just keep growing the sport that way. I think is the best. It's worked for a long time, and let's get back to it. All right, we're gonna go with 2 more questions here. Jaduba7 said, who came up with the idea of a mystery disc for Black Friday? I don't know how we got to that or whose idea it originally was. It was a very much collaborative effort once the idea happened, because we knew it needed to be a very agreeable stamp that looked kind of exclusive and cool. And then obviously there was months of planning going into it because we had to put it in videos and podcasts and all that stuff. So I don't know whose idea it originally was, but it worked out very well. It was very, very fun to like have people solve these different riddles and stuff. Will we do it again next year? I don't know. I think we'll definitely do a different spin on it because people will be looking for it. All right, final one. Breezy Small says, thoughts on playing with discs from only one manufacturer. Is there a benefit? The only benefit that comes in is if it's just plastic's consistent. So like if you really like Z plastic from Discraft and you're really confident with that in your hand, that's a benefit. But typically what I tell people is unless they're paying you, don't do it because you just pigeonhole yourself. Like if you love a zone, but you're like, but I have an all in of a bag and the Toro's a little bit too deep, and you're not as confident with it, then why are you forcing yourself to throw a Toro just so you have an all-in of a bag? Like again, unless they're paying you to do that, that's a whole different ballgame. But it might be vice versa. You might just for some reason not like the zone, and you want a deeper zone. You want to be throwing the entropy or the heart, but you're like, but I'm committed. I'm all Discraft. You just lock yourself in a corner for no reason. So I don't think the benefits outweigh, because the benefit really is just you have consistent plastic across the board. You don't have to learn a bunch of different plastics and stuff. But that's also some of the fun of disc golf. I think that it sucks the fun out of disc golf to go just one manufacturer. Now, I do like mold mineralization. So I do like, if you're trying to get really good at disc golf, having an overstable mid-range that you beat in to be flippy, and like, because then you have the same feel. And if you're really confident with a Rock 3, you can have all Rock 3s and you're always confident. I am a proponent of that, but I don't think there's anything wrong with being like, I have my Rock 3 as my go-to mid-range. I complement it with a Justice and a Zone. And then my fairways, my go-to is the Vulture from Discraft, and I complement it with a River. You get what I'm saying? Like, I do like narrowing down your molds, but it also, again, that's only if you're trying to be super serious about disc golf. Disc golf's about having fun, and one of the most fun things you can do is just throw a bunch of different discs. So don't lock yourself in a hole. A lot of rambling this episode, but hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully my points came across at some point in there. We'll be back next week to walk you through it all some more, and hopefully I'll see some of you at the Unchained Conference down in Florida this weekend. Really excited to be joining y'all down there. Be flying out on Friday, but regardless, I'll be back here next week. Talk to you then.